Welcome to Inside the Issues. I'm Renee Ng in for Amrit Singh. Now, many people associate Los Angeles with the entertainment industry, and others might value its famous beaches or diverse culture. But there's one thing everyone agrees on. LA has terrible traffic. The Journal of Consumer Research says it is the worst in the country, with almost 8 hours of congestion a day. Now, here's a look at the intersection of Hollywood and Highland. Now, these streets are usually highlighted in red in whatever navigation app you use. Now, this is near the Walk of Fame, several theaters, and the Hollywood Bowl, and it's usually considered a must-see for tourists, or at least until recently. Now, earlier this year, Visit California reported a 9% drop in international arrivals to California. And Ryan Thompson spoke to workers in the tourism industry about the shift.
Summer has arrived on the California coast, but on Venice Beach, the crowds are thinner and the shops much emptier.
Americans don't really shop here.
Marcela Mendoza's souvenir store thrives on foot traffic, especially among foreign tourists who are more likely to take a piece of LA home with them.
It's very quiet now. A lot of days are very slow. Some days are a little busier.
Since last winter's wildfires, she says tourists have stayed away.
The fires changed everything completely because it's close to our business. This is Venice Beach, so Palisades is right here. It's close to us. Santa Monica is where the fires almost hit. They stopped it, thankfully. And so after that, a lot of Airbnbs and stuff got shut down. The highway got shut down. So this way kind of got shut down a little bit.
Despite that smoky air now being long gone, Los Angeles has been slow to see the number of visitors pick up again. The trend is being felt across the Golden State, with Visit California warning of a drop in all visitors, but especially among international arrivals, which are projected to fall by 9%.
Vine, c'est la seule rue perpendiculaire sur laquelle on a des étoiles. Donc...
Foreign focus guides like Natasha Mitchell have already seen the impact. Bookings from French-Canadian visitors have dropped, and she says policy changes in Washington have scared many people away.
We know Canadians are mad, and I know Quebecois people are kind of boycotting. I had my last tour in March. I haven't had any Quebecois since March, so they're yeah, it is. There's an influence for sure.
Encouraging Canadians to come visit the great state of California.
Governor Gavin Newsom has tried to reassure those hesitant Canadian visitors, even releasing this virtual invitation. But back on the boardwalk, uncertainty hangs in the air. And for small businesses like Marcela's, a summer sales slump could cost jobs.
This winter wasn't great at all. It was very I wouldn't say scary for us, but it was whoa, we had to fire some people, and we had to drop it down to 2 workers.
Now fully staffed and ready for the summer rush, Marcela hopes it's full steam ahead.
Thanks, Ryan. And California will have several chances to boost tourism over the next few years as the state hosts a series of high-profile sporting events. The World Cup is coming in 2026. The year after that, SoFi Stadium will host the Super Bowl. And of course, there's the big one, the 2028 Olympics and Paralympic Games. We have a lot to look forward to. Now, we're joined now by someone who has written a lot about the city's preparation for the Games. In fact, she's written a whole newsletter devoted to it. This is Alissa Walker, editor of Torch. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. So happy to be here.
So we're about 3 years until the big event, right? The Olympics. The city's facing a lot of pressure to host the Games. How far along are we in terms of preparations? Are we ready?
Well, yeah, I always say the question isn't really, are we ready? They're going to happen. What really matters is what happens in 2029? What does the city look like after? And what do we get left with? So right now, the question is, are we going to have these legacy improvements in place that we were promised as a condition of hosting all these events?
And speaking of improvements, you said in your newsletter that Metro's diligent planning is really kind of the only thing that has saved us from global embarrassment, if you will. And Metro, they have these ambitious goals, right, to complete, we'll say, 28 projects by the 28 Games. How are we doing with that? Are we getting there? What would you say?
Yeah, I think the big question is, you opened with traffic, which I think is the big concern also for all these events happening, all these people coming to the city and having to move around to all these places, for weeks at a time. Metro has done, the most planning, I would think. And from the beginning, very beginning, they did have this plan, 28 by 28. They've shifted priorities, as some things look like they weren't going to pull through. Federal funding was already tough to get. It's still tough to get now. And Metro is bringing together all the transit agencies in the entire region later this month to really just get everybody in the same room, make sure they're all on the same page. So I would say on that end, we're in pretty good shape because they really have been thinking about this. It's some of the other maybe gaps in how this planning is going that we might need to be concerned about.
And what are some of the gaps that you see there?
Well, if you look just at how do you get to, say, the bus or the train station, it's not the most pleasant experience, depending on where you're coming from. And if you want to look at just the way the city of LA, what we're facing just from a budgetary perspective, we had this $1 billion shortfall. We're trying to fix it. It's not going to get much better, even with the tinkering that the council members have done. So things like broken sidewalks, streets with no shade trees, we don't have a bike infrastructure plan really to move people around. So all those little gaps in the system, especially for tourists who are, coming from other places that have great transit systems, great streets, they might be a little disappointed and they might get really hot because it'll be in the middle of the summer.
Or maybe even a bit surprised, right, by what they see when they get here. Now, one common criticism among people in LA is concerns over safety on the metro. You take public transportation. What are your thoughts on kind of the state of safety on Metro and what your experience has been?
Yeah, I took it here today. I just try to take it every time I come here just to show that, it is like a really great way to get around. It's very, very safe. I don't feel unsafe on the system. And Metro, again, is doing tons of work to make sure that people do feel comfortable. And I think there's a bunch of things that could, initiatives that can be taken. They're trying these new fare gates. They're doing some tap to exit programs where you have to, pay your fare on the way out as well. But the thing that makes it feel the safest is just more people around. So things like just improving service, making sure that buses and trains are coming frequently. You have a nice, well-lit place to wait. That goes a long way.
That's some good points there. Now, you touched on this earlier, this almost $1 billion budget shortfall, right, that the city is facing. How do you think that's going to impact the city's preparation for the games?
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of city employees over the last, a few weeks as a lot of them thought they were going to get laid off or fired. And there is a lot of concern, I think, just without having more concrete plans in place. I think a lot of people understand what we're supposed to be doing as a region, but looking at, what it means for the vision, how it all comes together. And so what I would want to see mostly, over the next few years is something like a really unified mission statement, that everyone can rally around and the employees know why they're doing this. Because what's going to happen is we're going to get closer and closer to the time, and what the city is planning on right now is relying on volunteers to pick up a lot of the slack, because that's how a lot of these mega events work. So we have to make sure that everyone's working together, both the volunteers and the people who are doing things like planning and design and engineering. We're going to have a lot of city employees who are going to need to be working extra hours.
Also in a timely manner, right?
That's right. And we've got this big deadline looming. Yeah, you need to make sure everyone is on the same page. Yeah.
And then obviously, there are going to be some unforeseen hiccups, right? There's the January wildfires. The city is also working to rebuild, put resources, efforts towards that. But at the same time, we have these Olympics coming up. We don't want to keep our eye off the ball on that. How do you think city leaders are going to have to really balance those priorities as well as whatever may come down the pipeline in the next few years?
Yeah, I think we're not going to be able to do everything we said we were going to do, and there's going to have to be trade-offs. I think one thing that everyone keeps coming back to is the city officials are saying, well, in 1932 we hosted and it was the Depression, and in '84 there was actually a big recession, and the reason that we are doing the games this way, car-free games and no-build games, and the way we're doing it kind of with this, very austerity almost agenda is those legacies, right? So we can do this, but what we need to know is, are we going to be working together as a team and making sure that everyone in the region is coming together and that officials are really laying out what that looks like when it's over? Because otherwise, are they just going to drop into town, throw a big party and, we don't get anything out of it. That would really be a shame.
And then we have to clean up the mess.
And who's going to clean up the mess? Fewer city employees, and we already have a lot of pressure on people to make sure to deliver basic services in the city.
And one more thing I do want to ask you. You mentioned car-free games, and that was actually a point of discussion where you were on the show last. And some have said that's kind of transitioned to a transit-first games. And then the city is also, they've recently announced this partnership with an air taxi service. How is this going to work? Tell me about that.
Well, we've gone from car-free games, walked back to transit-first games. Now they're saying you might be able to drive if you want to. And then they recently announced a car sponsor, Honda. So maybe those promises weren't as strong. But what you will start to see if there's not a really good plan for taking transit, because we have to get people to take transit to the venues. It doesn't work otherwise. You don't want to get stuck in traffic on the way there, of course. If you start to see that the promises start to fall apart a little bit, you'll see things like an air taxi company, which does not exist, by the way. These are not operational anywhere in the United States right now. But their person, as part of coming into this sponsorship, has been saying, we don't want people to get stuck in traffic. You can take an air taxi from one place to another. Buses work just fine. We did it in '84 the same way. Nobody had to fly over the traffic to avoid it. So I think that can be something that we can look forward to. We're not going to need their support, and they might not exist anyway. So let's just focus on buses and getting those bus lanes on the street and helping people get around without a car.
Just first things first, right?
First things first.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. Alissa Walker, editor of Torch. Thank you. It was great to have you on.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. For more stories in your communities, click the subscribe button right here. You can also download our app or watch us on TV for the latest information, balanced coverage, weather updates every 10 minutes, and more. We'll see you then.